We are back. We are back. Today, we're talking about talent buying. To some people, also known as the music director, also known as the booker, all the same role, different titles. Um, you can kind of label it whatever one you prefer. I've been fortunate enough to talent buy the last 18 years of my life, with a couple massive runs within that. And today I'm going to tell the story on how I kind of got to that position, and I'm going to give out a bit of a roadmap, and I'm going to lay out what I would recommend to someone trying to get into a similar role in today's climate, in today's market. Just to start it off, my story for talent buying, I entered clubs 18 years ago as a promoter for a couple small venues. Shortly after, maybe like 6 months in, I was working at Club Space. And when I mean promoter, I don't mean promoter in the global context of the person throwing the party. I mean it in like the local context as I was hired by the venue to bring people to the club. I would promote things like, say, Travis at the door, buy tickets from me, or if you need a table, I could set that up. And I made money via commission, whether it was per person, per ticket, or a percentage of a table. And at the time, there was probably like 50 to 60 of us that worked for a space. And I would say two or three of us were like really standout promoters. I was fortunate enough to be one of them. I had a very good grasp of social media early on, and I was able to exploit that resource to access a mass amount of people and bring like, I mean, massive numbers to the club. On average, maybe 150 to 200 people a week, and big events even bigger. Um, and it was probably within a year and a half to 2 years in that role that one of the minority partners, Emmy Guerra, um, picked up on the fact that I had this little talent. He had a marketing agency at the time called Guerra Marketing. They were a guerrilla marketing style company that ran a bunch of venues, including obviously space, other venues, and projects outside of nightlife. And he tapped me to help develop their social media department. It was an awesome role. I learned a lot from expanding social media as well as just being side by side with like him and his team, going deeper on the event production, promotion, marketing, and obviously the talent side. One of the people in his office was Luis Diaz, who became a mentor over time, and he was the talent buyer for Space at the time. And just to give context of Space Miami, there's been three ownerships. The original was the Louis Puig era, which had Emmy and Luis Diaz. There was a middle era, which I guess you'd consider the Opium Group era, and then the current guard, which is 3 Points Link Miami Rebels crew, right? Two of these have been amazing, the original and the current. In between, it was a bit of a dark age. And I was in this role maybe like a year or two before Puig ended up selling the club. I was just working in Emmy's office, social media, and I was still a promoter. And then Luis Diaz, the talent buyer, would tap me to help him with like artist liaison stuff at the club, the big events, like their pool parties, and obviously the music weeks and stuff like that. And this is kind of where I started to get a taste and interest for a role like this. And I was just helping out, hanging out with the artists, making sure that they had what they needed at the club, walking them in the venue, getting them to the green room, getting them set up when it was time to play, make sure that they were able to leave on time and get to their car, back to their hotel, like all that like logistical stuff. And this kind of gave me an early access to building relationships with the talent and their agents and managers. Um, when Space got sold to the second group, they expanded Luis Diaz's role to being talent buyer for like four or five venues, and this gave him the ability to have a bigger budget, which allowed him to hire an assistant talent buyer. And then that's where I got into that role. And that's where my communication line with agents began. That's where I started to learn how to present offers, how to pitch projects and venues and different things to agents that we've worked with before or we haven't worked with before, and we were trying to formulate those relationships. It gave me the early knowledge on how to do this role. And, in short, I didn't get along with that ownership, and maybe within a year, year and a half of that, I left Space, which people thought was crazy, right? Because it was the top club, still is. And, I started Humans Alike, and I took over this small venue, which used to be the Vagabond. It was called Seam at the time, and that's technically I had announced Humans Alike at Space. We were doing some stuff with it, but it really, Humans Alike truly began to develop a thing of its own at this club called Seam. And that's where I became truly a talent buyer. Even though at the time at Space I was putting offers together and I was helping Lewis, it was really his name, his resource, the Space legacy, and the Space bankroll that allowed me to do any of that. When I went and started my own thing at this new venue with Humans Alike, all those existing relationships were there, but none of those agents or managers had any desire to leave Space. So I figured out very quickly. I always knew what the sound of music I preferred, which was definitely more housey, tech housey, and stuff like that. So we just decided to pivot and focus on DJs that fit that sound, that fit our crowd, that fit the same type of music that I promoted for whatever it was, those 8 years I was at Space prior. But, but that weren't getting booked by Space. So the next wave of those sounds, and we used that as an opportunity to build Seam and Humans Alike at the time. And that lasted about a year, year and a half, and the owners started to have some of their own issues, and we separated, and then that's when the opportunity for Heart Nightclub came, and the rest is kind of history. I'll save another video to talk more about the story of Heart and how that formulated. But in short, that was kind of my lucky story. And from Seam, we were focusing on $1,000 to $4,000, $5,000 bookings, and that's where I built my name as a promoter with agents. That's where I built my reputation with a promoter with agents, and that's where I was able to show people that, hey, I could bring talents that weren't coming to Miami, or maybe they had came to Miami and they had a bad show. We gave them a great show. We were over the top hospitality, and and when I went into Heart, it allowed us to continue booking those names. But as the shows kept getting better, as the budgets grew, we were able to book everybody from Martinez Brothers, Solomon, Marco Carolla, and everything in between. We also broke dozens of acts that are huge now that had their first shows in the United States with us. And that's kind of the short story of how I became a talent buyer. I love the role. It's amazing and easy and hard at the same time. It's easy when things are going right, and it's terrible when things go wrong, and it's when things go wrong and how you navigate it, which is going to be the moments that you prove to agents and managers that you're capable to do more and bigger things. So next, for those of you that have no experience, that maybe weren't fortunate enough to be in the positions I was in, I'm going to kind of talk about how I would recommend to you to get into a role of whether you want to just be an overall promoter and do the entire event, or if you want to begin your journey as a talent buyer. And either of those, I would say, are probably going to start the same way. Because since you have no resume yet, you have no relationships possibly, and and you have no trust with agents and managers, you're gonna have to start from zero. So what I would recommend, the same thing I recommended to DJs in another video, I would find in your city, wherever you're at, a venue that's struggling. It's empty every week, or maybe it's not empty, but they're just struggling. Or maybe they're a good venue, but they have a night that they're not operating. Maybe it's a venue that's open every Friday and Saturday and they're crushing it, but they're closed on Thursdays, Wednesdays, Sundays, whatever it is. Grab a night somewhere where they're either struggling or not opening. Every venue either wants to turn around their revenue if they're struggling, or if they're doing well but they're not open more nights, they want to be able to open more nights. The more nights a venue's open, it lowers their costs for their successful nights. So even if you have a venue that's open every Friday, Saturday, and they're crushing it, even if you were to open on a Thursday and technically maybe break even for them, they're now dividing their hard cost bills like rent and power, internet and base salaries across by 3 nights, which is 12 nights a month instead of 8 nights a month, right? So it lowers their break even on their successful nights, which increases their profits. So your Thursday or Sunday that might be breaking even for them has now technically increased their profits on other nights, right? And that's a more economic thing. I'm not going to go too deep on that. But essentially, find a place somewhere, doesn't matter what it looks like, just a place to begin your journey, to prove to the world that maybe you have some unique talent as a promoter, a marketer, a talent buyer, a combination of all of them, and get it going, right? And I want to say, immediately let go of this idea that you're going to go and book the obvious headliners that everybody knows. Those artists probably already have promoters in your town. And if they don't, they're most likely with agents that are at such a certain level that they're not going to put a high caliber talent with a person with no experience of paying on time, no experience of successful shows. They're going to want to see some type of past performance of shows to prove that you're capable to take on their artists and deliver a good show. Because the last thing that agent wants is to roll the dice with you. The show goes really bad. Maybe you don't pay at all. Maybe something goes wrong. Maybe the artist isn't taken care of, and that agent doesn't want to risk losing that artist over a bad choice. So you're gonna have to start from the bottom. And my recommendation: find agents that aren't getting any love in your market. Find artists that aren't getting love in your market, small artists. Find artists that maybe have performed in that city but have had terrible shows. And be the one to give them the alternative. Book them. I would stick to minor, less than $3,000 acts, like anything from 500 to 3 grand. Just start writing agents, put together offers, and present yourself. You know, send them an initial intro email, tell them about what you're doing, tell them about your resources, tell them about the venue, and a lot of them might not reply, but some will. Artists are always looking to add to their tours to offset costs. In the same way I just said a venue would like to be open an extra night a week to offset their costs. An artist flying from Europe to maybe do Miami and New York and Chicago, if you can offer them another show on that tour, it offsets their costs for the big flight from Europe to America, right? Or whatever country you're booking from. So I would start with there. You know, start with small agents, boutique agencies, small artists, develop them, give them great shows, and then keep repeating that formula and make sure you pay on time like contracted. Make sure you're highly communicative in emails. You're gonna have to do something which is called advancing. And actually, I'm gonna break down all the aspects. When you send an offer, and I'll show an example offer sheet on the screen up here, and maybe I'll even give a downloadable template in the description. I'll try to put something together for those of you really digging into this in the first time. But put together an offer. There's going to be a few types of offers you're going to do. One is, ideally, if you have the venue consistently, you can kind of just go to agents and be like, hey, we're doing this venue every Friday, once a month on Fridays, whatever the scenario is. And you can present what's called a MAD offer. It's MAD, which is an acronym for mutually agreeable date. And essentially, what that means is, hey, this is just a blank offer for any date that you can make work for the artist. So that's one scenario. It's called a MAD offer. Another is you could just send the agent, hey, here are the next 5 or 6 dates that I have available. Let me know from who your roster is available. And then I'll let you know who I think I could sell. And essentially, we'll go from there, right? So those are kind of like the two scenarios and how you're going to figure out which artists are available or how you're going to present that part. And then next is there's going to be, and if you watched my video on agents versus managers where I told artists the type of offers they're going to expect, well, it's the same coin flipped over now. Those are the offers you're going to be sending, which is there's going to be a few different types. One is the all in, the other is the landed, and the third is like a plus plus, which means you'll be covered in flights. So the all in is pretty self-explanatory. That's one fee and it includes everything. That means the artist needs to cover their own flights. They need to get their own lodging or hotel or Airbnb in your market. They need to get themselves to and from the airport and to and from the show. And it just includes everything. It's just one flat fee for you. There's no surprise costs. Next is the landed one, which is the most common, which is the artist. This fee includes the artist's performance. They have to book their own flights. And then you, the promoter, are responsible for things like the hotel or Airbnb, the car service or the Uber, and maybe a dinner or a per diem, like it's called a dinner buyout, and your responsibility for whatever's on the rider. And then the last, which is one I don't do, I've only done it once, is like I guess we can call it a plus plus. It's where it's the same thing as the landed, except you cover the flights. It's really the only difference. I don't like doing it. It's pretty rare in the United States. The only time I ever did it was for a booking that I specifically really, really wanted. They had never played in America ever. And essentially, they were like, look, if I'm going to come, get my flights. I don't really want to deal with American logistics because I'm not familiar with the territory. I caved in the first two times, and then we renegotiated later and stopped doing that. And I just do that because coordinated with the artist, flights that they're happy with. If they drag them getting an answer each day, the flight cost can change. It's a huge variable that's unpredictable for my P&L. And for those of you who don't understand, the P&L is a profit and loss. You should always budget and plan your events, and you should try to do a projection to see what potentially you can make. Excuse me. You should always do a projection to see what you can make. And I do 3 projections. I do a realistic projection, I do a worst case scenario projection, and I do the excuse me, Jesus Christ. You should always do a projection. And when I do a projection, I usually do 3 scenarios. I do my average scenario, which is probably the most realistic. I do a worst case scenario, which is what's the bare minimum amount of tickets or I need to do at the door or the bar that I need to do just to cover and break even. And I want to see what that looks like. And then I do like, hey, what's a super sold out scenario looks like? And I do that because I'm like, all right, the middle one is kind of like, this is probably what I'm going to make if everything goes smoothly. The worst case scenario lets me see what it costs to truly break even. And then from there, I decide if I actually think I could sell that many tickets for this artist or whatever those scenarios are. And in the best case scenarios, like the dream profit night, right? And then also go into this always knowing that you're not going to win them all, right? And be very smart with the winnings when you do win, when you do profit. Don't go and blow all that money. Always keep extra funds in the accounts to account for the ones that are going to lose. You're not always going to win, and very early on, you're probably going to lose a lot, right? Not like a lot in the money, but just lose more often as you navigate and try different talents and figure out what works and doesn't work in your market and what works doesn't work with the marketing and with the promotion and all these things. And at some point I'll go through like how I would market it in VED. I'll do that in another video, but yeah, those are those scenarios, right? And I would say early in your talent buying journey, do the landed deal. Don't get an Uber. It's gonna be rough. Pick up the artist from the airport. Pick them up for the gigs. Take them back to the airport. Those car rides from the airport to their hotel or Airbnb It might be 10 minutes, depending on your city, might be 30, might be 45 minutes, but it's going to give you one-on-one time to formulate relationships with the artists. Take them out to dinner when you can, more time to build that relationship with that artist. And if you're good conversation, if you're fun to be around, that artist is gonna give great feedback to their managers, to their agents, which is only gonna instill more trust in those agents and managers to give you more talent, to give you access to maybe bigger talent eventually. Agents talk to each other. So maybe the agent at that same agency that has the bigger talent you haven't worked with yet will hear from the agent you are working with that, hey, all my shows are going great with this talent buyer. The artists love them. The shows are packed. All the feedback's awesome. You should talk to them. Like, I can tell you, every time I leveled up with talent was because I was over hospitable. And even in my heart days where we were doing like 12 hours and 15-hour marathon parties and 18-hour marathon parties, I would suffer with the lack of sleep to take the artist back to the airport in those early days. Um, Eventually that just fizzles out because your responsibilities grow. But in terms of the offers, the building the relationships, offer the agents or the managers whenever they can, just be like, hey, are you coming to this one? I'll get you a hotel. Would love to take you out to dinner if you're able to make it, like things like that. Like, yeah, it might eat into your profits a little, but again, builds the relationships. For those of you that live in the cities where these agencies are, you have a little bit more opportunity than the rest of us. I would usually try to make a trip out to like New York or LA back in those days once a year just to go and get some FaceTime with the agents that I was working with most often. I would see them obviously at Miami Music Week, ADE in Amsterdam. Never made it to IMS, but that's a big one. And there's a few other big conference types weeks where I would recommend, if you have the budgets to go get more FaceTime with artists, more FaceTimes with managers, more FaceTimes with agents. ADE in Amsterdam's probably number one for this for me at least. And then, that's it. It's really just like for the how the artists need to build relationships to get their careers going. You as a promoter, you as a talent buyer need to do the same thing. You might start small and indie, like I'm telling you now, but as you build and build and build, you're either gonna go a path like I and others have gone with my companies, where we say independent, or at some point, the big venue, the big corporate monsters out there like Live Nation, Zomniac, AEG, or a big monster venue like the Mirage in New York or some big club in whatever city. These venues are always hiring talent buyers. Sometimes they have multiple talent buyers, and they usually pick from indie operations where talent buyers are well received by agents, managers, and artists. Right? They'll talk to agents, and they'll be, these big machines with big budgets for you to do bigger shows. They talk to these agents and managers, and they're always peeking into, hey, what talent buyers are doing really good or sending out. We need to hire a new one. Who do you recommend? I got recommended a bunch of times for big roles, but the few times that like major machines had reached out to me and offered me a great job, was at like super peaks of humans alike, and I just believed in what I was doing, and I don't really like having a boss, so I stayed independent, right? But a lot of friends of mine had gone on and have done amazing things at these big companies and have had unlimited budgets, and that gives them the ability to do really creative and cool things, right? And then next, and I probably should have said this one first, but first before the last part. But next, like really book into what you believe in, like book music that you truly love. Understand the idea that each market is different, and hopefully, what you like is something that can work in your market. For those of you who go to shows, that party, that rave, that go to clubs, you should be able to have an idea of what people like and don't like. You do need to lean into what is happening in your market, but don't be afraid to not only focus on the trend now, but to try the talent buyers that really stick out the most are the ones that are able to peek into the future. and get a really grasp on where things are headed, and then jump in on those artists that are in those future trends early and developing those relationships really early. Because if you're very good at that, you can grab an artist maybe early in their career, $1,500, $2,000, and that artist 3, 5, 10 years from now might be that monster headliner. I mean, I could tell you at Heart Nightclub, artists that we broke in the United States, like they played, if not their first United States show with us, it was definitely their first Miami show with us. Artists like Dennis Cruz, Frankie Rizzardo, Camel Fat, Deborah DeLuca. And there's dozens of names. I would really have to go through the old lineups and see, but like these four artists I've just named are monsters today. They're doing the biggest clubs in the world, the biggest festivals in the world, and have the biggest tour schedules, right? And it's not a bragging thing. It's just saying like, hey, I was able to look at the sounds we were booking now, and then kind of grasp onto people and artists that were maybe in similar circles, or even the artists. Remember how I told you building relationships and the car rides, the dinners, like all these things. So a lot of the artists around me at the time, like uh Choose and Ceballos and Technacia, were both key factors in telling me to take a look at Dennis Cruz really early on, and we put him on stereo showcases, on shows with back to backs with Technacia really early to develop him with the Miami crowd. So the, you know, if you really want to be a great talent buyer, if you really want to do super creative things, or you want that big job one day, you need to be able to look beyond the trend and see where where the future is headed musically, genre wise, and like what artists are going to potentially pop off. And not to say that I have like some super prediction and I'm always right. I might have jumped on 50 or 100 different $1,000 and $1,500 acts that I thought had a chance to be big, and I would say 80% of them didn't pan out, but the 20% that did were able to monetize. Maybe the first couple years were not money makers, but when they finally had those big moments, I was able to make back that investment, those years of building that artist in that market. So like I said, you're not always gonna hit home runs. You gotta have a strong stomach and be willing to lose some time to do this role. Um and really just believe in what you're booking. Like I could tell you I've also worked at venues where I had to book music that I hated, and though I did a good job, those were tough nights. Like you still have to spend time with those artists. You still need to be at those shows, and I could tell you a 2-hour set of some genre you don't like, the time goes by much slower than an 8-hour set of an artist you're in love with musically. So yeah, curate with intention, build trust with your crowd, like booking things that you authentically believe in. You as the maybe not the talent buyer, you as the promoter side, you're gonna have more success with it because your crowd who trusts and supports you, they trust and support you because you book things that you believe are at the highest quality. Whatever that is. The spectrum of music of what's underground or commercial or what's cool or not is subjective to the end users. So don't fall into that trap of trying to impress people by trying to book the coolest thing because you think it's the coolest thing, or you think that's what people think is the coolest thing. Book it because you authentically believe in it. Whether it might be a little bit more mainstream or not, who cares? As long as you believe in it and the crowd that supports you believe in it, that's all that matters, right? And I'm going to add one more thing to all this. Since you're starting off boutique, since you're starting off new, since you might be going to a struggling club or a club with an off night, you might not have budgets. The venue might be like, hey, cool, you could do this. You're going to need to pay for the talent, and you're going to need to pay for the marketing, and we'll structure out a deal with the door and the bar where you can make that money back if you fill up the place, but the costs are on you. So you might need to finance this early, and you might need to finance this yourself in the early days. And outside of the money side, whether you want to be a promoter or not, you might need to be early on to prove yourself. And you might need to learn how to market an event, to run ads, to collect data and manipulate that data in your favor. You might need to build a promoter team. You're going to need to figure out everything you can to create revenues to support those talents you're booking. So, like I said, if you want to get into that role, remember you're going to have a lot of hats. Um, and then I'm trying to think. And then I mentioned a word earlier called advancing. For those of you who don't know what this word means, advancing is everything that happens to prepare for the show. Usually there'll be a separate chain, an email chain that you do for the offer. And then from there, we'll begin maybe an email chain for marketing, flyer proofs. You might need to get these artworks approved by the agents, the managers, the artists. Each artist you book, the scenario of the approval process might be slightly different, but essentially it'll usually be via email. Once you get the flyer approved, you'll go into a marketing mode, announcement plans and stuff like that. Be very prepared, be very organized, be very detailed. One, you want to do this to prove that you have the ability to execute, but two, you also actually want it to do really well, so you can perform and sell the tickets or give away the free RSVPs or whatever the scenario is on how you're trying to fill up the club, right? And again, I'll make a separate video on stuff like this. But once that part's been done, you'll flip into the advancement mode. And this is the process where you'll work with the artist or the artist's tour manager or the artist's manager. Each artist of different caliber has a different team that's scaled small and indie or big because they get huge fees and they have a bigger team to help them with all these responsibilities. But the advancing mode is everything of the logistical side, right? You're going to give them the set times. It's called an ROS, which is a run of show. And usually you're going to give them their set time, the openers and closers, the opening hours of the club, the closing hours of the club or the festival or the pop-up. And they're going to want to see the full set times. And they're going to, if they know the market, they might even renegotiate their set time, right? The artist might know like, hey, this is a bad set time in that city. I would prefer to play at this. So you're going to need to be either creative and flexible to accommodate that, or you're going to need to be able to present a good case on why you have it the way it is. You're going to need, if you're responsible for hotels and car service, you're going to need to provide all the hotel information, the confirmation. If they need a late checkout, you need to organize that. If they need an early checkout, you need an early check-in, you need to try to organize that. You're going to need to provide them the contact for the driver or whoever's picking them up from the airport and the gigs. Or if you're doing an Uber buyout, you need to organize that and send them that money or maybe pay them cash the day of the show. All these things are kind of variables, but there's going to be a process. Usually the artists or their management will send you like a template to fill out of all the stuff that they need for the show. Sometimes super small artists haven't gotten to a super organized place where they have this, so you might just send them everything randomly. I could tell you from the perspective of someone who manages artists, some small indie promoters love to do this over text or WhatsApp. We hate it. Get really good at emails and email communication and being quick and responsive. That shows you're organized. And we all like it there because from the management side, when we miss something or forget something or can't find something, it's much easier to search it on an email than a text or a WhatsApp. So really try to get used to being good on email communication. If you're a terrible writer, start learning grammar and communication because that's going to make you look more professional. And if you want to go up to bigger tiers of talent and agencies and positions, you're going to be able to communicate your vision, your story, and everything moving forward. And even from a marketing standpoint, communication is going to be key, right? So the advancing is all the logistical stuff. And I'll give like a very super basic template also of what an advancement sheet looks like on the screen up here as well. But and I'll leave it up for a little bit. But every agent, every artist, every management, they have their own variation of these templates. Um they're all usually the same amount of information. Sometimes they add new questions. There might be things on there related to, like, if they need a visa to work in your market. There might be things for, like, organizing photography or visuals or production or different things. Again, every show is different. Early on in your career, eh, this stuff's gonna be very simplified, and as you get to bigger artists and bigger acts, it's gonna get more complex. The writers are gonna get more complex, the requirements are gonna get more complex, the budgets are gonna get more complex, and the advancing's gonna get more complex. And then, yeah, and I'm just gonna wrap this up now because I feel like I've been talking way too long on this topic. Artists talk, agents talk, managements talk. All of them talk, even if they don't work for the same companies or managements. Artists are friends. They see each other at big festivals and conferences and stuff like that. They're going to talk about you whether you do good or bad. If your show goes terrible, they're going to tell their agents, their managers. Those agents and managers are going to tell their peers. If the show goes great, they're also going to talk. So, on how you conduct yourself, from the communication early on to the communication after the show to the communication in the car rides, the dinners, the green rooms, the shows, how the show goes, whether it's slow or busy or packed, how the vibe is. Like, every one of these aspects are going to determine and lay out the blueprint for your future. And it's okay to have one show, maybe once in a blue moon, not go the way you want. But if there's a consistent pattern of you being sloppy, you not paying on time, your show's not going great, or on the other side of that coin, you pay on time, you're highly communicative, you're very fast at responding, the shows go great, the artists feel comfortable around you, they have a good time, is going to determine the future outcome of how you grow or don't. And for people like me, or the people who run space, or the big clubs around the world, they are obviously great at this, and this is why they have longevity, right? And the promoters that you see to have a couple year run, now you probably see why as well, right? Either they're not being profitable or they're burning their bridges, right? So I'm going to end it with that. Build a track record of success, have great shows, put your heart and soul in it, from picking who the artists are to the marketing, the promotion, and everything in between. If you do that, not only are you showing the artists and the agents and the managers that you truly care and you want great shows, but the people paying or buying tickets or attending your shows, they're going to see that and they're going to want to support you more. And as you grow, leverage your results. Lean in. Maybe your first show, you don't have much to say when you're presenting yourself, but once you've had 4 or 5 successful shows, and now you're maybe reaching out to an agent you haven't worked with, in that email, you're like, hey, I'm interested in some of your artists, blah, 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 blah. We just had this show with this artist and it's sold, we sold out, and this show with this artist on this date and it's sold out, and this show with this artist. And here are some links to some videos from those shows. Here are some links to some photos of that show. All that stuff will give you ammunition to the next agent to prove you're capable of representing their artists in your venues, right? And I think that's how I'm gonna wrap it up. If you have any, I feel like I missed some stuff, so ask some questions. And once I've realized what it is, maybe I'll make a part two. At some point, I will make a video on how I budget and plan for events and how I create my projections. That way you can kind of see how that model works. And yeah, that's it. As always, if you like what you see or you don't, like, subscribe, comment, follow, all that stuff. It really helps us grow. Super happy with where we're at in such a small amount of time. So thanks, an extra special thanks to those of you who are supporting us early. And for the rest of you, I'm looking forward to sharing more information and knowledge with you all. See you next time.